Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. Hello, listeners. Welcome back to your favorite grad school podcast, Dear Grad Student, the podcast where grad students come together to celebrate, commiserate, and support one another through this long and difficult journey. I'm Elana. I'm a sixth-year PhD candidate and your host. And today we have a special, new, fun kind of episode where I get together with my Dear Grad Student team and we talk about current events and things going on in real time for grad students right now. So I am so happy to formally introduce to you two of your Dear Grad Student team members for 2022-2023. We'll start with William Oda, and then we'll go to Aubrey Tingler. Will, go ahead, introduce yourself, or I should say reintroduce yourself to the people.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is William Oda. I am a fifth-year PhD candidate at University of California, Riverside. And to speak in current parlance, I am a rank and file member of UAW 2865, the Assistant Student Educators Union here at UC Riverside.
Wow, fancy. And we'll get into what that means in 5 minutes. Aubrey, introduce yourself. Tell the people who you are.
Hello, I am Aubrey Tingler, and I am a second-year master's student in environmental sciences at the University of Maryland.
Amazing. And did you each say what you do for the podcast?
We did not. We
Great.
failed
Will, what
at
do you
that.
do? Why are you here? Just kidding.
I basically organize Alana's Google Drive for her. I think that's my primary job.
But like you
wizardry.
Really do.
I know. All my elementary school teachers would be surprised that I somehow became organized in some fashion at this point in my life, but I've made it. But what I think was hired or, brought on the team to do is to like put together run sheets, write episode descriptions, organize the way things look when you read them on websites or Spotify or wherever you're looking at it. So just like, some info gathering and organizing and writing and stuff for Elana.
Yeah, a lot of behind the scenes, like copied. You do a lot of like writing, things like that. I also feel like when I get a postdoc and move to a new city and have to like have my ADHD diagnosis like reconfirmed by a new doctor, they'll be like, "Are you sure?" I'll be like, "Have you met Will?" who like deals with my ADHD with this podcast, because poor Will. We should compensate Will. Aubrey, why don't you talk about what you do for the podcast just briefly?
I am the guest coordinator and social media manager, which basically means when guests are identified for the podcast, I reach out to them and coordinate their recording time and any other concerns and needs that they have. And then I work with social media content that is podcast episode centric and not Elana being her wonderful self centric.
Both of them, I'm hopefully being myself. So.
I think you're being your wonderful self in all of it, but I guess being your wonderful self without the accompaniment of guests.
Yes.
Is the content that I work on. Yes.
That's right. Yeah. Elana alone in her office that would be my content.
Yes.
The people know who you are, and now that I magically am wearing headphones, I think we should jump into, I guess, what I'm calling a team talk. It might be a different name by the time that this is published, but today's team talk is going to be all about the fact that we are not paid any money, and more importantly, that UC students have been striking about it for the last month, 2 months. How long have you been doing this?
5 weeks?
4 months?
Yep, 5 weeks. I think we started on November 14th, so just past the 5 week or finishing the 5 week mark.
Going
I
strong.
also vote that we call this a lab meeting, a DGS lab meeting.
Yes.
A lab meeting?
I love it.
Okay, but where's the alliteration?
This is just cool and fun. We're grad students meeting as a group. We can also journal club,
Oh, yeah, you know what? Maybe we could have patrons vote on what to call this. I feel like we have journal club, lab meeting, team talk. What do you have it? Do you have an offering, Aubrey?
I think those are I can't think of anything else that's like grad student themed off the top of my head.
All right. I think that those are great. We're going to put it to the vote. Stay tuned. Maybe we'll call it all three of those things. A team talk, lab meeting, journal club with the Dear Grad Student team. That'll be the title of this episode. Okay, so UC students have been striking for 5 weeks then, you said?
Yes, we have.
Okay, so
and that is not just students. It's actually the assistant student educators, the student researchers, and the postdocs and associate researchers who are the postdocs who've been postdocs for too long and are still in academia.
God bless them.
So there's actually 3 whole different groups that are all striking together, which is actually something the UC is trying to break up in the future by staggering contract lengths. Yes. Yes. Of course, the management is breaking up any potential cooperation between the different types of workers in the future already.
Can I also say, like, okay, but how wild is it that across how many UC universities, like, this is actually coordinated and organized? Like, this isn't on a whim. The fact that it is so like, there's like social media content that is like clearly like someone came up with it. Like, they're doing it in a very strategized fashion, like in a good way. Like, the word is getting out. I'm like, this is like a campaign. Like, this could be a presidential campaign. Like, who is running it? And like, they're gonna be a millionaire, like, just one day. They just have the mind. And I'm sure it's a group of people, but
is your union all run by volunteers, or do you have like full-time union staff?
At like our bargaining unit team level, like, I think it's basically a bunch of grad students, postdocs, and student researchers who like volunteered for this. I know for UC Riverside, the 2 people who were bargaining for our campus as part of the negotiations, they're actually both in my department. They're both in the evolution, ecology, and organismal biology department. So shout out to Jared and Ariana for all the amazing work they've done. But they're just literally decided, like, hey, I care so much about all my fellow workers. I'm going to devote hours and hours and hours from like 8 p.m. to like 1 in the morning for 5 weeks straight to like bargain and deal with all the grad students who aren't feeling seen or heard, and like listen to them and host town halls and everything. And these are just like people like all of us who decided that they care enough about like sort of the future of all grad students and the people who they're working alongside now to volunteer their time. I think high up in our union, there are people who are just paid to be union organizers, but I have never really seen or interacted with those people. It's all grad student organized at the campus level at this point.
So why don't we rewind a little bit, because I think that most of the people listening to this conversation know why the striking is happening, but I feel like undergrads might stumble into this, or people who are just unfamiliar with like a US grad student system or what's going on. So Will, because you're part of the group that is striking, can you give a little bit of insight as to like, how did this come about? Like, what is the problem for US grad students and pay? For all of us, really, but I feel like especially UC students, because California is so expensive to live in.
Okay, so I'm going to take it all the way back to 2004 when the economy. No, I'm not going to go that far back, but
since the dawn of time.
Yeah. So the reason the strike is happening is that specifically graduate students and mostly PhD students, they need to be paid for their time because they have advanced degrees already and they are completing an additional level of advanced training. This means that they are both kind of a student and a professional scientist, researcher, academic at the same time. To keep the cost of training these people low, universities like to call them students for the purposes of paying them, which means that when you look at the number of hours you work doing research that you often wrote a grant for and brought in hundreds of thousands of dollars to the university for, you are getting paid less than minimum wage on an hourly basis if you actually account for all the hours you spend working on TAing and research and writing and doing all these things that grant universities prestige and money and allow them to educate undergrads and do stuff. So because of that underpayment, and then especially in the UC system, because of budget cuts that began in 2004 because of the financial crisis, I am going to go back that far.
Take us back.
And the increased cost of tuition, which has not been reflected in graduate student pay, lecturer pay, adjunct pay, anyone who does the majority of teaching on these campuses, there has been a continual sort of cost of living cut in salaries over the last 17 years. So this means that you are now basically making no money after you pay your rent, and you still have insurance and groceries and healthcare and childcare and everything else that you need to survive. So all of these groups got together and decided that we were going to strike for what they're calling a COLA, or a cost of living adjustment, to increase the amount you make. And this followed actually a 2018, 2019 wildcat strike at University of California, Santa Cruz, because they have the most rent burden out of any UC campus. So we are all trying to find a way to actually survive and live as people who have bachelor's degrees at a minimum. A lot of people have master's degrees. You have professional experience a lot of the time. And then you're suddenly being asked to take a pay cut and go back to school. And I'm going to just throw this out there and be very open. My first year package as a PhD student, I made $13,850 a year before I took on any additional work, any additional pay.
Is
And
that like the whole academic year, or is that 9 months or is that 12 months?
That is 9 months. So that is from like September through June. And then I got an additional like job in the summer through the university. So I got like another, I think, $3,000 or $4,000. So like I made like maybe $18,000, maybe $19,000 as a first year on what my official like job stuff was. And then I broke all the rules about not getting secondary employment because I needed more money. And I was getting married that summer. So I had to pay for a wedding. So I did lots of other stuff, and it actually ended up being really cool. And I, got a job at a houseplant store and stuff. And I like enjoy being busy and things, but it would have been great if they actually just paid me enough to afford to live where I was teaching classes and doing research. And I wrote and got a big grant my first year and brought that in from a federal agency. And
which is like a huge thing at your first year.
Yeah.
Like first years don't bring in grants.
Yeah. Super big deal.
Yeah.
Like casual, like
yeah, no, it was only a little grant that's funded me for 3.5 years. It's
but like so I'm having like a couple of thoughts to the things that you've said, because the first thing that came to mind is like cue Olivia Rodrigo's Brutal, because all I keep thinking as you're talking is like, who am I if not exploited? Literally, like that song could be about grad school. The second thing that I was thinking about is the fact that like I live in Kentucky and I've made the same income the whole time I've lived here. And just for some background, my tuition's paid and my healthcare is paid, and I no longer have student fees. They're now covering that for students. And my stipend is $21,000 over 12 months in Kentucky. Where that is still below cost of living, but like my 2-bedroom, my 2-floor, 2-bed, 2-bath, like townhome is like $1,200.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I paid something like $1,650 a month for a 1-bedroom, 1-bath, like 450 square foot apartment in the first year.
Right.
Which was like
so
all my money every month. Thank God I was engaged and my wife made the amazing amounts of money that a public high school teacher makes, so we could afford to live together.
The glorious, luxurious salary of a public high school teacher.
Right. I'm like, she gets it. She gets it. Well, and like with Luke being a nurse, it's like that's the only, I mean, I will say like that is the only way I live where I live, but at the same time, I can pay, right. But like I can pay a percentage of rent towards him and not be rent burdened. You know what I mean? Like we split things up to like I think he makes like 4 times what I make. So like we usually split things up, or like I'll do 25%, he'll do 75% for like most of the things we spend money on, which is like very kind. But it's possible in Kentucky with the income that I have. Aubrey, do you have a similar thing? Like, do you know if your university is even close to cost of living where you're at, or?
So we are pretty far below our cost of living. So University of Maryland is in the DC metro area. For context, it's not like in a middle of nowhere area in Maryland. So very high cost of living area. So the cost of living in the DC metro area is about 45 to 40, closer to 47,000 a year with inflation, and that's based on the MIT calculator for cost of living. And the base in most STEM departments is around 22,000. It can be significantly lower in departments that tend to receive less funding,
like humanities,
so that would be English, like arts and humanities,
culture, really.
So we're definitely not hitting the mark. We did get what they called a cost of living increase recently, but it just like bumped us up a little bit. It didn't like approach the actual cost of living in a super meaningful way. So, and I was working for 5 years before I went back to grad school. So I took a 55 to 60% pay cut to go from a full-time professional salary to a grad student stipend.
And I'm like, I kind of wonder about this, like, which is worse, because I didn't take any time off. So here I am, 27 and a half years old with $400 in a retirement account because I'm not allowed to have there's other issues that Elana hasn't contributed to her Roth till this year, but I didn't have the choice of like a 401k ever. I've never made salary above like $21,000. And I'm like, I hold a master's degree, right? And I'm a year and a half away from a PhD, and I've never made more than $21,000. And it's funny because I was talking to my mom, and she was like, well, well, after you graduate, money will be not a non-issue. And I was like, haha, what do you think I'm doing? Like when I'm a postdoc, I'll make like 50K, which is still probably good for where I think I'm going to end up. Like, it's fine. And certainly with Luke's income, it's like great. But then she was like, yeah, but then when, if you get an academic job, like it'll be not an issue. And I'm like, I'm sorry, what do you think professors make?
I
I'm
love
like,
how there's this pervasive myth that professors make a lot of money.
right. I'm like, no, we're all exploited. There's just a little bit more privilege for professors because they have some of them have job security. And even if you sexually harass somebody, you're good to go. So I think there's a lot of misinformation out there about income regarding academics. This reminds me of the fact, I don't know if y'all have seen, I had my first viral TikTok this last week talking about, thank you so much, talking about like undergrads and the way that they see TAs. I wish that undergrads knew, be in solidarity with us. Like, as much as they want to complain about TAs, it's like, hold on, back up. We're on the
I
same
did
side.
see it. I was like, this is great. I like the undergrads. I feel for them because undergrad is stressful in its own ways, but also they need to
Yes.
hear this. Like, your TAs are
Right.
not having a good time. We are
We're
unwell.
not good. Yes. And like literally, I'm like, all the problems that you're having, I hear you. They're valid. You're having them. They're not our fault. Like, we're having the same ones. We're there with you. We're still like, we're in it. And I don't know. I wish that there was like more camaraderie. Like, I think, Will, I don't know if you can speak to this because like I'm not like on the scene, but I've seen some TikToks of like there's posters all around UC schools that are like, stand with your TAs or be in solidarity with your TAs. Like, if they're not going, like showing up for classes, blah, blah, blah. Like, I know they were trying to hire replacement TAs and people were like signing up and then not showing up as like an FU to the administration, which I thought was amazing. Like, do
Love
you
that.
find that people on campus who aren't in one of the positions that's on strike are being supportive generally? Like, I know you said there's controversy. And clearly I stand on the side of like, fucking pay grad students a living wage, but like, what about how's the other half living?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the big things is us striking, and by us, I mean TAs in particular, more so than GSRs or postdocs, has a huge impact on undergraduate student progress, ability to have a final grade, do stuff. And I think the only thing I could ask is be empathetic with someone who spent 4 to 6, 7, 8 years and then got a job after they have 1 to 2 advanced degrees and is still being paid less than they would have working at the Taco Bell down the street to teach your classes. Not a joke. I saw like the starting salary for Taco Bell and by me in Riverside, and I would make more working there full time. So
I mean,
it
like,
is.
nothing against Taco Bell or Taco Bell workers, but you don't need a master's degree to work at Taco Bell. Like, you hold
Yes.
you hold an
Not
advanced
required.
degree.
No. So like I completely understand that you feel like you maybe got cheated out of submitting your med school packet as early as you wanted because you don't have a final grade, or you feel, especially if this goes into the winter quarter. I know at UC Riverside, my department faculty have been amazing and supportive in a lot of ways, and they've actually sent a letter to our dean that they would cancel all classes that require a lab section, which is almost all of them if they don't have TAs, because it's so important to the learning process and the function of our major, which we run the
It's
largest
almost
major
like
at
they need
UC.
us.
Yeah, like, and we run the largest major at UC Riverside. So for every lab or for every lecture, there is then between 13 and 40 lab sections for it.
Whoa.
And that's all run by TAs. So if you think about like the number of hours that the TAs are putting into this versus the professors, we are not compensated nearly the amount that you should be for the number of hours you're working and stuff. Like, I pretty regularly, I log and track my hours to see if I'm getting close to that 20-hour cap. I and this is me now as a fifth year who've had practice, approach that cap most weeks when it comes to grading, answering emails, preparing like for lecture and everything, so I can like actually teach students what the heck is evolution and genetics and things that I don't actually study in my own research, and I have to refresh myself on whenever I teach a new class, or there's a new subject that I don't quite understand, or the professor changes what the lab material or discussion material is. Not to say there's even worse situations where professors illegally or against our contract make the TAs create their own lectures, create PowerPoints, work on quizzes, do things that aren't actually part of their contract.
I
But
had to do that.
because there's no protections and there's no good ways often to complain about these things that you're being forced to do illegally, you end up doing them and spend even more time doing this. So like there's huge negatives, and we understand that. That's why it was so hard for many of us to go on strike and do these things, but it's also why it's so important that we do this now once
Yeah.
for all, so it's not a continual process, and hopefully the UC starts actually, you know, helping people in one of the most expensive places to live in the entire country.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because you're reminding me. So I have only TA'd for 1 year, only because I've been funded by research since then. But I just want to paint this picture for you. Okay. I came straight out of undergrad. And I will preface this by saying I had the expertise to teach what I was teaching. Like, that was not the issue here. It was Psych 101. Like, I had a whole psych degree, a bio degree. Like, that was not the issue. But as a first year, first semester grad student, I was teaching 4 2-hour labs a week with 100 students. I was coming up with all of the lecture material, which was like a review from their lecture class, coming up with the in-class activities, coming up with the quizzes, grading everything for the lab. And then I was also part of grading for the actual 500-person lecture along with the other lab instructors. And like just the in-class time was 8 hours a week. And I think that people think that TAing is like, oh, you just have to grade it. It's, or like my least favorite, it's just a Scantron. I'm like, okay, you have to reserve time to get your Scantron scanned. They take time to get scanned. Then you have to make sure that, like, if you're one off, you have to rescan all of them. Sometimes people's answers don't show up properly. Sometimes people don't put their whole names in, and you have to figure who goes to which, and like, then people are missing and you have to reach out to them. You can't release grades until everyone's taken it. Or there's like, I mean, there's so many pieces that like I don't think that people appreciate. And I also think like, I mean, not that there are some very engaging and engaged professors out there, but most of the times it's the grad students like on the front lines in the trenches with the students. Like, you have a problem, go to your TA's office hours, like especially for those big giant lecture classes, which are often the ones that students are TAing for. It's like the first line of defense is like, did you check with your TA before you went to the professor? They're busy. Like,
And then
we spend more time on the classes than they do at times.
yeah, and then there's the whole problem of if your entire class and your lab is based around Scantrons and multiple choice exams, what level of learning are we pushing students to engage in? Are we preparing them to think critically and have transferable skills? That is one of the big challenges for me in the lab sections I primarily teach, is that like we have them do a research project. I cannot make a research project into a Scantron exam. I have to spend hours teaching field skills, how to do statistical analysis, how to avoid pseudo-replication, how do you do the specific techniques for the many hundreds of projects that students have come up with in the time that they are taking ecology and evolution with me and the other TAs who teach that class or other classes. It is very, very time consuming. It's mentally taxing. And that is like me looking at it from the perspective of I teach 2 3-hour lab sections, and then I have 3 hours of office hours a week. Like, I can't even imagine doing that full time with like a high school classroom, or like, I mean, just like, I don't know, like the level of teaching we do is minimal oftentimes because of the constraints of high numbers of students in undergrad programs at this point. And we've made compromises to make that work and give everyone degrees who want to get degrees. So like, we want to be there, we want to do everything, but we would just ask that like we have enough money to pay rent and then not be able to like change the tires on our car because we got a flat driving through the parking lot that someone spilled nails in because they were mad at the UC, or PETA decided that they hated the animal research that we're doing or something.
Well, and like, this is another point. Like, I think that there are a lot of people, and again, like, I mostly just see this online, who are like, why do you need to make so much money as a grad student? And I'm like, whoa. We're not trying to make money as a grad student. We're trying to break even as a grad student. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, this podcast obviously came about as like, I want to help grad students out, but certainly there was a time when I was like, it would be amazing if I did get some extra income from this. That hasn't happened. It's not the important piece. I'm breaking you with a podcast, but like grad students will put time and energy into things to make that extra dollar, especially when it's contracted that they can't work like an official second job to make up their income. Like I know one person in my department who got like special permission to like she ended up working like at a comic shop, which was awesome. She was like, it's for my mental health. Like, I just need to be around like my hobbies. And it worked out very well, but it was a whole process of like applying to the chair. The chair had to talk to the dean. The dean had like, they had to go all the way up and all the way up and all the way up. And like, I'm glad it worked out for them, but that was like to get 8 hours of like minimum wage at another place. Like for what? On the weekends? Like
And
for
even
what?
if your university allows it, it can still just be challenging to work another job during grad school. Like not only just like the time commitments, but like in how kind of receptive like your department and your PI is to it. Cause like I worked a second job all throughout grad school because I couldn't afford it any other way. It's not possible in the area where I live. It's not possible like being a fully professional adult who had pre-existing bills, etc. And so, I would mark my availability for my job, based on days when I didn't have like definitive commitments like class or lab meeting or whatever. But then they're like, oh, can you meet at this time in the middle of the day? When of course, like they expect you to be available 9 to 5 hours, but it's like, I'm sorry, I am at my other job because I am trying to keep myself alive and fed and
Yeah.
with a roof over my head.
It reminds me of I put out a TikTok like 10 minutes before we started recording where I was like, this podcast is just about not bleeding out during grad school. And I don't know why, but what you just said reminded me of that. So, okay. So I feel like we've like gone over all the issues. So again, sorry to keep deferring to you, Will. But again, you're doing it. You're part of it. So where are negotiations at now? Because I know that you said that there was like a development as of midnight last night. Where are things at now? And like what progress still needs to be made as far as like from your personal perspective, not speaking for the hundreds of thousands of people potentially striking?
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna go back to sort of some of the stuff. The biggest thing is that we asked to be fairly compensated for our work, and that started out at the beginning of the strike is $54,000 a year, which at almost every campus removed rent burden, which means that you're paying less than 50% of your rent or of your income to rent. So that means you could be paying 49.9% of whatever you make to it, but you would still be under that official rent burden amount. And that number that we needed to fix that was $54,000. So that was our initial salary compensation demand. We were asking for money so people could get to campus and not have to pay. So like climate and transit support. So like we're not all contributing to greenhouse gas emissions. Like if there's public transportation, you can use public transportation to get to your campus. If you want to buy like an e-bike or a bike or something else, there might be a way to get some of that money back. Or like, I don't know, I spend like almost $1,000 a year on parking passes because even if you're a grad student and you work for the university, they make you pay them for the privilege of parking and be able to walk in. So it's like,
and to walk 15 to 20 minutes to your building. Let's
yes,
be
no,
so clear.
I walk 3/4 of a mile to my building and 3/4 of a mile back. So I'm getting in
Yep.
my steps when I do
Right.
that. And I pay them $1,000 a year for that privilege. So some climate and other stuff. One of the huge ones that I think was really important is that we are on average like between 25 and 35 years old. A lot of us want to have families and kids. Like I got married, a lot of people are having children. So support for working parents, like in the form of childcare, reimbursements for daycare, just like actually having good enough healthcare to have a child in the first place. I think under our new offer, there's something like $1,400 a month in childcare reimbursements. Oh no, that's for a quarter, I think, actually, not a month. So it covers like 3/4 of a month of childcare at daycare while you go and do your PhD, and it leaves you basically 2.5 months of childcare, which I think is like $3,000 a month ish in our area. So that basically you're like thousands of dollars short on just daycare for your kid while you're trying to get your PhD.
It's like honestly an insulting amount.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that you can't even get into the UC daycare if you're a grad student. Like, you have to go find somewhere
Right.
else.
This is my other thing. Why? Like, why not? Grad students
Yeah.
are the age, typically, of the people needing the childcare.
Yep.
It's things like that where it just seems like it's like a humiliating level of like at best lack of awareness and at worst like intentional mistreatment.
Like, literally. Discrimination?
Yeah.
Yep. Well,
I
and
mean,
then
like,
getting to
I've talked about this recently. Like, I am not having children right now because I'm like, I cannot understand how I could do what I'm doing and continue doing it. I actually know that I can't. Like, I joked with Luke the other night. I was like, we can have kids when you can afford a nanny a couple of times a week, because I did not move to a state that I hated and have certain experiences in grad school that I do not publicly speak on this podcast to stop doing what I'm doing. I can't.
yeah.
Like, I could never live with, like, I just can't. And the fact that it's not just accessible for me to have a kid and like drop it off on campus to like childcare and pick it up at the end of the day, like, why not? Don't you want me to be a better worker bee for you? You can
It's
abuse
also
me
like
better if you took my kid every day. Anyways.
even if your plan is to start a family after graduate school, like unless you have a partner in a much more lucrative field, like with what money, you know?
Yeah. Or like the fact of like, I want like, then this is another thing that like I don't even know if I'll see in my lifetime, or like maybe in 50 years. Like, why can't I contribute to retirement? Can I please have a 401k? I know. Everyone's like, Elana, open a fucking Roth IRA. Okay, I understand. I'm just saying, they have me classified for so many reasons, so I don't get benefits, blah, blah, blah. I'm classified as a temporary part-time employee. Which is ridiculous because I work year round, more than 20 hours a week. But because of that, like, I don't think people understand, like, I'm not building wealth. What is wealth? Like, I've been listening to this podcast, her first 100K, and she's like,
I've
she's
listened to some
great.
of that.
Oh
She's
my gosh.
amazing, but she'll be like, negotiate your salary. And I'm like, LOL, but what if you can't? Like most, and like, this is valid in like any other field. Like, if I was in a field and I'm not making enough, it'd be like, no, like, you go fight for what you're worth and blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, yikes, like,
Yeah,
can't.
there is no transferring to a new PhD. Like, you had to fight pretty darn hard to get in here. There was 5 other qualified people, and you were the lucky one who did something to make that better impression, which was,
Right.
again, why I took a $13,800 a year.
I will never, and like,
I don't think I'm gonna recover from that, Will.
I'm like, so okay, right. So
like,
you told us that the first time off recording, and we were like, what? Like, I'm unwell. It's not good. It's bad.
Oh yes,
That's bad.
and we will publish an image of my thing because it is an unbelievable number, because that is wild. But
put it across the screen.
yeah, but there's just like so many other things that also, like, we want international scholar rights, so that they don't accidentally get deported because they accidentally took an extra half semester to graduate and then they just don't get their PhD. We want like the ability of students with disabilities to work and come in and have those needs met so they can study, because everyone deserves to pursue this if they want.
Right. Not to mention all the accommodations that they could magically make happen over COVID, and then magically they can't post COVID. And I'm just like,
they just like
that's
disappear
funny how that
off
works.
things.
Interesting.
And then
and
like
we're
all
on
those unspeakable things in the form of like anti-bullying protection. So if a PI or anyone else decides to harass students, probably a female student, probably someone who doesn't really have the ability to say or stand up or do things the way they want, we can actually file a grievance and hold that person accountable for once in their lives, even if they have tenure.
Right.
It would be great to be able to do any of these things, and we would like all of them to happen. And the news that Elana sort of hinted at is that there is a new verbal agreement that happened after 5 weeks of striking and taking this to private mediation. So a mediator talked to both sides. They kind of got some compromises, I guess, from both groups. From our bargaining team, which is, I think, 22 people from the 10 or 11 UC campuses. I don't even know how many campuses there are on the UC. It's somewhere like 10 or 11.
Who knows?
And then from the UC chancellor, I think his title, Michael Drake. And basically it comes down to where the new base pay, so when you first start out as a first year with no experience, you would make $34,000 a year at most campuses. And then for some reason, UC Berkeley, UCLA, and UCSF would make like a few $1,000s more, maybe because the cost of living is higher there, maybe
Probably.
because those campuses are shining stars of the UC system, because Santa Barbara and Santa Cruz, I think, actually cost more than those campuses. So,
Naturally.
the UC is doing some stuff, but basically there's like a
Favoritism.
big wage increase on the table. It's like a 46 to 57% increase across the UC system, which would be
Wow.
absolutely huge. And there's like some steps to get us there by the end of the contract. They're offering some stuff that guarantees a 3-year post-candidacy waiver for non-resident student tuition, which would be a great step in helping protect international students, graduate students, as they finish out PhDs. They're doing some stuff with childcare, which again seems insultingly low for how much childcare costs, but at least they're doing something. And
They just want the gold star that's like, you tried.
Yeah, but the other thing is that they could just not give us all of this stuff in writing in the actual form that like they verbally agreed to still. So, and we look to have progressed a little bit in mediation.
Yeah.
It looks like they are trying to kind of meet some demands, but this still leaves us incredibly short on all the things we asked for to protect international students. It leaves us incredibly short on some of the things we've asked to protect disabled students. It is not a salary that actually meets rent burden for the majority of students in the UC system who live in incredibly costly coastal cities where they are being squeezed out by, I would say, misuse of environmental laws to enact NIMBYism, or not in my backyardism, to prevent new housing, and particularly dense, cheap, affordable housing from being built in places that very much need it. So we're making progress, and now what is on the table is the chance for our bargaining team, once a written offer comes out and the people in the union get to look at it, to vote on creating a tentative agreement, which would then set up in place a plan to actually create a final agreement and get us all back to work, maybe potentially by the start of the winter quarter, to prevent disruption to undergraduates, which would be amazing. And if you're an undergraduate listening, I don't know how many of you there will be, but write to the UC chancellors and deans and provosts and say like, hey, you should give them what they want and get us back into the classroom, because otherwise we're all screwed also. And we don't want to pay you the $33,000 a year probably it costs to attend a UC if you're not going to give us the TAs who do the majority of teaching.
Right. And especially like, I mean, some of those undergrads want to go to grad school. This is going to be a problem for you too, even if you're not in the UC system. So like, let's just preface there. Off the top of my head, this might exist and I don't know about it. I don't know a graduate student or a grad program that is currently paying appropriate cost of living income, or like stipend, I guess I would say. If you're out there,
exist.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying, right? So if you are listening to this and you're out there and this exists, please let me know. I will buy a sweatshirt. I will name my firstborn after your department.
Don't do it. I think Columbia does it. Do you want to be stuck wearing a Columbia sweatshirt?
I would be fine
Columbia
with that.
May. That would be, I could see that.
Yeah, Columbia did a 9-week strike and their grad students got a pretty darn good contract.
I knew that they did a strike. I just didn't know if it actually like happened for them. You know what I mean? I know that I know UK where I go, they got a 10% raise, which was nice. I mean, it's still below cost of living here, unfortunately, but yeah, I think that the big takeaway message from today's conversation is like, it's a problem. This is happening all over the country. The UC students are miraculously banding together across UC systems, across different tiers of employment to try to make this happen. And I think that if you're a UC student or not, shout it from the rooftops that this is going on and we need to support graduate students, because I don't know, part of me is like, in any other situation, like would this not just be like lawsuit after lawsuit after lawsuit of like labor law infringement? I know that it isn't, but it certainly feels like it. Like they have gone through every loophole to make sure that they aren't, but the realities of our position is like probably should be illegal.
I also just want to I know we're trying to wrap up here, but I want to pick back up briefly on that equity thread that Will kind of started to get to.
We're chilling. You talk.
Yeah, I know. I feel really bad about, like, we could talk for a really long time about the last 3 things that I kind of glossed over, and we should spend more time on it.
I just want to say specifically that, like, if graduate school institutions are interested in diversity, equity, and inclusion, this is the diversity, equity, and inclusion issue. Because if you are not willing to pay graduate workers a living wage, you are making the potential financial risk of earning a higher degree too high for people who do not come from substantially privileged socioeconomic backgrounds. Granted, there are still plenty of people who choose to take that risk and feel that they can do it and that they can make it work, but that option feels closed off to too many people, and it does a lot to harm diversity in academia.
Yes, everything that you just said, Aubrey,
The
is
crowd goes
100%
wild.
true. It is
just
why.
just
Yeah.
wanted to slide that in there.
Yeah, no, it's
No, you
why.
didn't. You just like hit me with the truck with it. It was good. That's what we needed.
No, it's why in part it's so disappointing to see all the things the UC are not willing to bargain on after they formed DEI committees and initiatives and things.
Well, but we know why they formed
Oh no,
those.
no, that's what
We
that was the point I was getting to.
know.
Thanks for beating me to the punch,
Okay.
Elana. I don't get a
So
mic drop
sorry.
now. All right, no, all right.
I'll
So
do it. I'll
Elana
still do
gets
it
her
for you.
mic drop. Yes, yeah, they did it for very non-altruistic reasons, and Aubrey pointed out some of the big things is it actually makes them a lot more money to have people come in from privileged socioeconomic statuses as the primary people pursuing PhDs and masters because they make a lot more money off of them. These people don't require the same amount of training. They don't have to teach the unwritten curriculum to them. They get to rely on other things, so they don't care about the wages as much.
Yeah,
That
you
is,
know who complains less? People who already have money.
yeah, and all of it just is a big vicious cycle. And then the people who come professors are the same people, and then they have tougher times teaching low socioeconomic students, and they can't relate to the problems as you're going in the classroom, which is why having an awesome, amazing, diverse international group of PhD students like the UC has is so good for the undergraduates. Is why the UC, fairly or perhaps unfairly, is called an engine of social mobility, is because you actually have educators like our current TAs who can relate to the challenges of first generation students, of like minority students, of students who have never tried to pursue a science degree or they've never tried to pursue any degree in their family before. And you're able to understand those issues and challenges and things and teach them, oh, here's how you actually apply to a PhD program so you don't spend hundreds of dollars cold applying and then no one reads your stuff because you didn't email a professor beforehand. These are the types of things that you get from a TA that you don't get from a random professor in your lecture of 500. And they're the ones who help you do research opportunities. It's the ones who sponsor you and write your letters of recommendation. Like your TAs, the grad students, they do all of the things that professors used to do when classes and universities were small enough for professors to do them.
Right. Right. And I think another thing too, it's like if you are listening to this and you're like, well, man, I don't want to have a TA. I'd much rather be a professor. Okay, go to a small liberal arts college. And with that, I also think that we need to wrap up solely because I can feel my capitalism is the end of the world, like feelings coming up. And that's not what this is about. But the problem here is capitalism. And I think as we're headed out here and outroing, I want to remind everybody where they can find both of you online, because we did not do a social media shout out to start. And I think everything we've been talking about, I know, Will, you've been screaming it on your socials, and you've been linking like places people can follow and petitions people can sign. And Aubrey, you just made a new Instagram account that's academic focused.
Sort of trying.
No, oh my God, it exists, so you've done it. It's like when I tell you I'm sort of trying and you guys are like, no, you have the thing, you're doing it, you're great. So let's tell people where they can find you. And on this point, then, more information, I think, especially with what's being shared on your channel. So we'll start with Will. Where can the people listening find you online?
Okay, so you can find me on Twitter at WILLIE_MOTA. You can find me at Instagram at WILL_THE_WILD. And then you can find me new on Mastodon at WOTAPOINT at ecoevo.social. So that is Willie_Moda on Twitter, Will in the Wild separated by underscores on Instagram, and at WodaPoint on Mastodon. I'm not very active on Mastodon yet. I'm actually sort of underwhelmed about the death of Twitter so far. It seems to be relatively alive with a lot of complaining, but
yeah,
I am prepared for the actual death of Twitter.
It's
with
like
Mastodon.
death of peak Twitter. Like it's like death of the good stuff.
Never gonna be what it was.
No,
yes.
R.I.P. I know. All right,
Oh,
Aubrey.
and
Where? Oh, is there more?
Oh, well, I was going to say, if you want to see my non-active TikTok commenting on Alana's, you can find me at Will in the Wild on TikTok also, where I'm mostly found in Alana's comment section, and maybe I'll start posting some stuff there as well.
Thank you for being so active in my comment section. Appreciate you so much. Also, it's true. Go stalk my TikTok videos and go like William's comments. Aubrey, your turn.
So I am less on academic Twitter as of the Elon apocalypse, but if you care to, you can find me there at Fairy and Gnome, which is spelled the weird folky way. So it's FAERIEANDGNOME. And
You
that
spell it the
is
way that Neopets spelled it, which would
is
be the
that how
correct
Neopets
spelling.
spelled it? I was definitely on Neopets, but do
Absolutely.
not remember that specifically. But
Oh,
that's kind of freaking fantastic.
I was on Neopets.
No. I mean, I like to think of it in the Brothers Grimm way, which is very much the appropriate way to think about fairies, with like the teeth and the
That's how I
maliciously
think of it,
leading
like
you
the
into
kind
the
of creepy,
forest.
mischievous. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think of
Um,
like A Court of Thorns and Roses, so that's fine. Go
yeah,
on,
but
Aubrey.
that's like a pseudo academic Twitter. It's like was a sort of unused personal account turned semi academic, and you can
Nice.
newly find me on my academic Instagram, which is at the EcoGrad, which is THE_ECO_GRAD.
Perfect. And for those listening who need a reminder of where to find me online, all the places that I exist online, I'm sometimes, but not really, on Twitter at Elana_Gloger. I'm also on Twitter at Dear Grad Student. And then I'm on Instagram very actively reeling around at Dear Grad Student Pod. I'm on TikToking around at Dear Grad Student. You got deargradstudent.com if you want to be a guest on the podcast, if you want to get some merch. What else? Oh, we got a Patreon if you want to support the podcast monthly. We have a Buy Me a Coffee. Did you guys see people are buying me a coffee?
Yes, they're buying the coffees.
Y'all,
People
thank
want to
you for
contribute. They just don't
supporting
like the
this
commitment of the
podcast.
Patreon. We love it. We love
Listen,
it.
you love a person with commitment problems. I'm here for you. I've made this for
Absolutely.
you whenever you want. No, but I want to say, for those people listening, thank you so much. As I mentioned before, I'm not breaking even very well. And when I start breaking even, we're going to start making some goals to pay my editor, grow this podcast, do amazing things. So thank you for contributing to the maintenance and future of this great, wonderful thing. This is the part where I ask Will or Aubrey if I've missed anything, because Will's really good at reminding me that I need
as your social media manager, I just want to shout out for the people loving those reels and TikToks. Please go interact with them, like, comment, share, and save, so that we can get some more interaction for the podcast by getting those social media interactions.
Yeah, especially Instagram really likes when you save them.
Yes.
So I don't keep track of my favorites, but I just like save stuff all the time. It's good for you.
Save the good ones.
I would like to say that everyone is proving me right, that people would buy Elana coffees on Buy Me a Coffee if I made her made one. So I am validated.
The people wanted it.
Yes, I forced her to do this. It is not something Elana volunteered to do. I would like to claim credit for forcing her to make a Buy Me a Coffee.
Yeah, that's probably what happened. I mean, in my defense, thank you.
Yeah, there we go. And then the other thing, if you haven't looked at Patreon recently, there's the new $10 a month tier, which has a very special book like access thing that is going on there that Elana is writing that I think everyone should be very excited to see. So if you're considering it, consider doing the $10 a month tier to read the book. Elana is she's turning bright red as I'm saying this.
Okay,
so
here's why.
the book is going to be good.
Alana's writing a smutty fantasy romance like trilogy. And I like accidentally have a what's the word? What's the word for the thing that comes out before a thing?
Like a prequel?
Yes! Thank you so much. It is late at the end of finals week. I have a prequel planned because something's wrong with me. So yeah, stay tuned to some more Patreon updates, because we also have $5 patrons get free stickers. $10 patrons also get free mugs. We're going to have some video content on there. We're going to have study sessions starting spring semester once a month. So we got fun stuff going on. We're going to have game nights. Will and I are still talking about this Dungeons and Dragons situation that I'm pretty sure we're for sure making happen. So there's like amazing stuff going on. Like, I don't know if you guys know, but like really cool stuff's happening for the podcast. So mostly because Aubrey and Will have started making me do things against my will, LOL pun. And then it works. which is wild. So thank you both for helping me get back on this podcast train after taking a very rough summer off. And thank you for being here today.
Thanks for having us, and thanks for listening to my flawed explanation of the UC strike. I am sure I missed a lot of important things, and I apologize to all the other strikers if I was not quite as accurate or detailed as you would have liked.
Yeah, and actually, I'm sure I'm going to post a TikTok with this episode. If we got something wrong or if you have more to say, leave a comment and we can get some of those comments posted. If you have even more to say and you're like, I want to do a whole episode on this, reach out to me because let's talk about it. So I would say that. I think you did a great job, Will. And I think that if there's more out there to hear, I'm happy to include it. And with that, listeners, thank you so much for continuing to listen to the podcast that I started during quarantine. I don't know when we're going to have another Team Talk Lab Meeting Journal Club. However, we will have them again soon. Hashtag bye. Hashtag bye.
Bye.
Look at you listening through the outro. I hope you loved this episode and are sticking around to hear the next. Share this podcast with literally everyone you know. In the meantime, you can find everything related to the podcast at deargradstudent.com. You can follow the podcast on Twitter at Dear Grad Student, on Instagram at Dear Grad Student Pod, and if you want to connect with me online, you can find me on Twitter at Elana_Gloger. That's ELANA_GLOGER. You can support the podcast on Patreon at patreon.com/deargradstudent or follow the link in the episode description. And merch! Who doesn't love merch? Podcast merch and more can be found at deargradstudent.com/merch. If you loved what you heard today, please leave a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you find your other favorite shows. Today's episode was made possible by the Dear Grad Student team members Coral Arroyo, William Oda, Aubrey Tingler, Vishal Thakkar, and Nicole Coates. You can learn more about them at deargradstudent.com/about. As a reminder, all resources and links mentioned in today's episode can be found in the description. And until next time, warmest regards, best wishes, sincerely, Elana.